Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome, and this is Tony Sherman, your host and guide. Thank you very much for joining us on Impact Teams Radio. Today we have a return guest in Martin Plumlee. Martin, thank you very much for coming back.
Tony, glad to be here. Thanks for the time.
Oh, thank you. So Martin was on a show a couple of weeks back, and what he was sharing with us was a leadership perspective from somebody who services corporate America and somebody who has been specifically trained in leadership as he went through West Point, succeeded in the Army, went through Ranger School, became part of that training battalion, and then used those lessons in his professional life. And today, I'm going to ask Martin to take a deep dive on some of those issues that he touched on last time we spoke, and just find out some more about his leadership philosophy. So Martin, thank you again.
Glad to do it. Thanks, Tony.
So Martin, you mentioned obviously at the very beginning West Point. How did West Point shape you in the early part of your Army career? And how does the lessons that you learned in those formative time of leadership, because most of us don't get that blessing, and I see that as a blessing. How did that shape you for today?
Great question, and I will tell you, the mission of West Point, and I'm paraphrasing here, but is to create and develop leaders for a lifetime of service. And, of course, that's indicating not just the military, but also just throughout life, business, whatever your pursuits may take you. Joe MacArthur's speech, one of his last, I believe his last formal public speech before he passed away in the early 60s, it's called the Duty, Honor, Country speech. And those are the ideals of West Point, duty, honor, country. And those are the highest of ideals. And when that is literally presented to you multiple times every day for 4 years, it gets into your DNA. And I'm very proud to wear my class ring most days and to try to live up to that. And it is a very, very high standard. You look at the lineage of the long gray line, great leaders like General Grant, General Eisenhower, Schwarzkopf, in recent times, obviously, General Petraeus. It's an incredible place to have been a part of for 4 years, and I'm always very proud to present that at the appropriate times as I deal with people. But West Point means the world to me. And one thing I do want to highlight is going through our initial time in basic training. We started off with 9 great Americans who wanted to be West Point cadets. Fast forward just about 4 weeks later, and we were down to 5. So some significant attrition in just a handful of weeks. And I just learned this about 6 weeks ago, Tony, that all 5 of my original squad mates from West Point, we're all still serving, whether it's active duty or reserve. And I'm especially proud of that because these are some great friends and people who have just made a great impact for our nation.
Wow. So that speaks to me of 2 things. In the episode we had last time we spoke, we were talking about executing to a standard. Fairly obviously, West Point has a very rigorous standard, and within a few weeks, it manages to get focused on who the people who are going to make it.
That's right.
Because if you're losing almost 50%, then it shows that West Point doesn't waver on its standard. And the second thing is, once you meet that standard and you've had that training, is the longevity and the commitment to those core ideals, because everybody that made the standard is still committed. And I think those are 2 great things. I mean, you called it executing to standard and the long gray line, but I like the idea of just a long journey in the same path. That's amazing, isn't it?
It is humbling, and it just blows my mind sometimes that I was able to even get into West Point. But once I had that opportunity, I seized it and still try to honor it to this day.
Yeah, well, obviously you still do because you're still in the reserves. But Martin, so obviously in West Point they shape you to be somebody who leads people, who brings the best out in people. Was that that culture, that people person in terms of leadership, was that what led you into executive recruiting, or was it something else?
Well, I would tell you, partly that is correct, Tony. As I looked at my life at the time of fulfilling my active duty obligations, I honestly did not know what I wanted to do. And as you may know, there are a number of firms out there across the country that specialize in placing military leaders into the private sector as they transition out of active duty. Well, at the time, one of those actually had an office in Nashville, and connected with them and learned about their business model and just fell in love with it and found out, gosh, what a neat business where you're always being able to interact with people, help your fellow veterans, and to develop relationships. And I just fell in love with it, and obviously to the point where 15 plus years later, I own my own business and strive to do very well at it every day.
So 2 questions on that then. I mean, obviously you fell in love with it, and I can see why. And you mentioned, helping your fellow veterans. So that was like the initial buzz that got you in there. But what keeps it fresh for you today?
That's great. And a lot of people get burned out with this business because it is very competitive, and certainly it is you're dealing with people. And no one walking this earth today has truly figured out people, because we're all complex, we're all different. I like to make the analogy of the newer Rubik's Cube, right? It's a 6x6. It's a lot of fun to play with, a lot of fun to work with, but I'm not smart enough to solve it completely. But I will tell you, working different industries, different businesses, different people, that's what keeps it fresh, because ultimately my next candidate may become one of my best friends in life. And I'm proud to say clients that I developed 10, 12, 15 years ago, several of those are still my friends today. So ultimately, it's just the uniqueness of building relationships and being able to truly serve people in the right way and help them better their careers and their lives. I find that very rewarding.
Wow. Okay. And again, that resonates with what you were saying last time about relationships. So the relationship part I can see, for somebody who's succeeded very well in a very structured environment like GE and prior to that, the Army. What was the turning point for you that made you decide to try a more entrepreneurial stuff? Because you went out on your own in 2012, didn't you?
That's exactly right. I will tell you, as I alluded to in the previous interview, Tony, some of it was personal circumstance, but some of it was certainly just timing. Being from Nashville and having a lot of great relationships, having a supportive wife, it was just simply the right time to what I thought was a calculated roll of the dice to, shall we say, hang a shingle and go out on your own. And I was very fortunate to have some prior relationships that I could leverage, but with my drive, my competitiveness, and leveraging things like social media, it was a pretty smooth transition. And I can tell you, it was nice to be able to run a profitable business within 4 months of launch. I'm very proud of that, and business is booming now, so it's fun to be doing what we're doing in a market like Nashville.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it shows you. I mean, it's a constant theme with you from the beginning of the first interview about relationships. And obviously, if you're going to succeed in executive recruiting, it's relationship is number one, relationship is number two, and relationship is probably number three.
That's right.
So you're leaving out on your own. You obviously fast ramp up. You're doing a profitable business within 4 months. Do you believe that a lot of the training and the learning that you got in the Army, that helped you succeed?
Oh, without a doubt. It is the personal discipline, the time management, the ability to prioritize, all of these things, I believe, can accelerate and help people succeed in recruiting, sales, leadership, all those traits and values that the military has taught me. It's just part of who I am and resonates to this day. So there is no doubt that background and training has helped propel me to have some success in life and in business.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but the funny thing is, though, you say this, and you've also alluded to the fact you've been very successful in the military in the previous episode. But one of the things that my son said, who's a serving Marine at the moment.
Well, thank you for his service.
Oh, well, thank you for yours, Martin. But yes, he's actually on active service. He's deployed at the moment. So his mother and I are watching everything very carefully.
Of course.
So one of the things that he said last time he came back, just before he deployed, he was actually given a speech to a young group of high school lads, and he went into the Marines. He got the Marine culture, he got the Marine training, but it didn't really transform him until a year or so into the fleet. And he turned around and he said to these lads, and I think it's so true, he says, you think it when you go in the military that they're going to transform you. They will only transform you if you will do what they will teach. Until then, it's still just words. And I thought that was very powerful that he's learned that in his own life. And I thought that's just a fact of life as well. A lot of people go on expensive training and they don't go on transformation stuff. But if you don't make it real, it's almost a waste of time going.
That's so true. Tony, you've raised a wise son, and it's incredible he had that type of epiphany relatively early in his life. So I know you must be proud.
Oh, I'm very proud of him, and I'm actually very pleased with the Marine Corps as well, because the young lad that we sent in there had a lot of raw potential, but I wasn't sure when it was going to be seen in life.
Sure.
And thanks to the United States Marine Corps, I'm seeing it maybe a lot earlier than I was expecting. So yes, I'm very pleased.
The Marines do a great job. Semper Fi. Obviously, that means Latin phrase meaning always faithful. They do a fantastic job. Every Marine I've ever interacted with has always been upstanding, loyal, honorable, and I know it's a great thing. So again, I appreciate his service, and again, you and your wife did a great job raising him. So
thank you. So actually, and talking about being on mission and laser focused, when you're talking about your mentor in the last episode, when you go to Paris Island to see them pass out as Marines, they have a huge banner as you go through the gates, and it says, "We make Marines."
That's awesome.
And it's fairly obvious they have one focus. I don't care what comes through that door, a Marine is leaving. And I think that's a set of people who know their mission.
Most definitely. That's fantastic.
So you mentioned in being in the reserves and so forth that you were in Kuwait. So, and obviously married, young family. What's it like as a leader being away from your family?
It is challenging, and I certainly greatly appreciate those men and women who've deployed multiple times. So I have all the respect in the world for those folks, and that was really kind of the main impetus for me re-entering the service in 2008, was just seeing these honorable Americans deploying multiple times. And I said, gosh, I'm healthy, military trained me, and I like to go raise my hand and give back and serve and go in harm's way if need be. So it is tough, but my heart goes out to those men and women who have just multiple kids and multiple trips, extended periods away from family. I'm not sure most Americans really understand how challenging that is. I mean, sometimes people go on a week-long business trip and they think that's tough. Well, go away for 9 or 12 or 15 months and get shot at. That is a different discussion. So let's always be cognizant of those folks who some have paid obviously the ultimate sacrifice, but those that have wounds and injuries and amputations, and sometimes it's those mental wounds that we don't always see. But let's please keep in mind those vets who've paid a price.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you raised PSTT, because it's, just because somebody looks healthy doesn't mean they don't carry scars.
That's right. That's right.
But for you, it must be especially challenging, because you mentioned being deployed when you're in the reserves, which to me, if I get the timeline right, you actually owned a business at that time.
That's right. I went on active duty, went down to Fort Bliss, Texas, almost 8 months to the day from when I started my business. So that was challenging. Correction. 10 months from when I started my business. That was stressful. I'm not gonna deny that.
So, what do you do? Do you put your business on hold? Do you put your how do you do this? Because actually, I've got a friend and she's in the reserves as well, Amy,
okay.
And she's a good project manager. She was holding like multiple projects in her head. She was doing great stuff, moving stuff forward. And then suddenly she's deployed for 3 months.
Right.
It's like she has to turn off Amy, the successful project manager, become Amy, the serving officer.
That's right.
And then she has to come back and pick up all these loose ends which have gone stale and stuff's moved on. And you're doing that in a new business. What was it like, and how did you plan to succeed?
Well, I tell you, Tony, I worked hard the last 60 days before I left to identify great people, and I had 4 people working for me in my absence, so that certainly kept the name out there. I will, if you will, promote the power of social media. I had a great young college intern that was just a gee whiz with this kind of thing between websites, LinkedIn, Facebook, et cetera, Twitter. He helped keep my name out there. And it's kind of funny, when I returned over the last few months, I have coffee or interact with people, and people kind of outside my inner circle that are associates, if you will, they remarked, Martin, I didn't even know you were gone. And, of course, a sensitive topic when you, like you said, have a new business. I didn't broadcast to the world that I was going halfway around the world for 9 months. But I would just say, thank goodness I had people with me that carried things on in my absence. And being able to stay in touch with things electronically, that makes all the difference. But by no means, my goal was just to walk away, Tony, and try to kind of tread water and then come back and ramp back up. So in some ways, we're in Plumlee Associates 2.0, but we're having fun for sure.
Yes. So do you see another deployment in your future, or is that the last one?
Well, that's an important question, and obviously my family poses that to me on a semi-regular basis. The reserves have made it a point to stabilize individuals, not units, but individuals for 5 years. So I am safe, if you will, for about 4.5 years from this day going forward. But my plan is to retire at least at the rank of lieutenant colonel. So I tell my wife I plan on deploying at least one more time. So she's not happy about that, but she's come to terms with that because she understands the legacy I'm building and what the sacrifices that we're making as a family to help provide us a little extra financial security down the road.
Absolutely. And actually, I mean, there's the family thing, because obviously your daughter will be significantly older at that point, and your young son will be at the school age.
That's right.
When he's born. But also, your business will be in a completely different, it won't be in that startup phase, I mean, which is far scarier. I mean, I'm expecting in 5 years' time, you'll have a good, solid business to be able to trust a solid team, whereas you had a brand new team at that point.
It was daunting, and lost a little sleep through that process. But again, I'm just very thankful to have great customers, great clients, and building my new team to do some incredible things going forward.
Great. So as we sort of wrap up this deep dive on leadership and the stuff that you've learned and you've been sharing with us, I know there's no secret sauce to leadership, but if you were to pull out a couple of core lessons that being successful in sales, in recruiting, in the military, what would you ask our listeners to take away and to practice over the next 6 months to become better leaders than they are today?
Thanks, Tony. In Martin Plumlee's humble opinion, ideals or intangibles like sincerity, of course, integrity, having a consistent work ethic, being creative, being bold, and ultimately, last one I'd like to highlight is humility. I coach people on this all the time. If coming out of the Great Recession, everyone was humbled, or someone close to you was humbled, professionally, or whatever the case may be. But I tell people every single day, humble yourself, and you can do better today. You have new opportunities to excel. So work hard, have great integrity, be humble, and you can do some great things.
That's brilliant. So I'm going to ask you one last question as you've wrapped that up. If people, John Maxwell says, leaders are feeders. In other words, they feed their mind. They're always trying to learn. How do you learn? Do you have some books that you can share with us? Something that our listeners can take away what you said there about humility, about integrity, see this reflected in great books, and keep reminding themselves over the next 6 months?
I would love to highlight three if I could, Tony. Right now, the book that's on my nightstand that I read a few pages every day is Coach John Wooden from UCLA. One of his books is called Coach Wooden's Leadership Game Plan for Success. He has 12 principles of leadership. One of the greatest takeaways from that book, Tony, is he valued time, literally every single minute. Some people would say he, in some ways, is a micromanager, but in many ways he was so much focused on execution, attention to detail, and that resonated in just phenomenal success. I believe his team won 10 titles in 12 years. So Coach Wooden is a great example of being a true leader. And a classic I would love to highlight, of course, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Just a great book, and it truly is timeless. One thing I'd highlight is people like hearing their name. Growing up, when you hear Martin, you hear Tony, and that the power, the psychological power of being friendly and being warm and endearing, that matters a lot. And then that book also taught me the idea of handwritten notes, and to this day, I write handwritten notes at every opportunity I get to my clientele, and I believe that makes a difference.
I would think so too, yes. I mean, these days, if you get an email, it's a job to do. If you get something through the post, handwritten or otherwise, it's special.
That's
so
right.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea. Martin, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today.
Tony, it is my pleasure. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I appreciate what you do and how you're trying to help leaders grow in their profession.
Thank you. And Martin, just want to finish up by saying thank you so much for your service.
You're quite welcome, and it is an honor. And again, appreciate your son and what he's doing, and I know you guys are very supportive of him. May God keep him safe.
Thank you very much. So, Impact Nation, this is Tony Sherman with Impact Teams Radio. Until next week, take some of these lessons and read some of these books. Great ideas there from Martin. I'll speak to you again same time next week. Bye for now.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.